What's up, guys? We've got attorney Austin Klinger here. He's a real estate attorney, and yeah, let's dive right into it. What's up, Austin?
How's it going, man?
It's going well. It's going well. Thank you for joining me here.
Yeah.
So how many years have you been practicing?
I guess probably almost a year and a half, really, of actual practice, but been barred for, I guess, a year longer than that. Just a year out of law school, I clerked for a judge. Wasn't actually practicing, just kind of observing.
Okay.
But actual practice, almost a year and a half.
Okay. And so where did you clerk?
Baltimore City Circuit Court.
Okay. And so were these civil cases or criminal? Both?
The judge I worked for was a criminal judge, so that was mostly what I was saying. But I attend a little variety. I had the luxury of the fact that my judge was serving as partially administrative duties that same year.
Okay.
So yeah, I got to dabble in a few different things outside of like just criminal matters.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you know what? Let's talk about that. What exactly does it mean to clerk for a judge? What is that?
It's kind of like you're the right hand person of that judge. Like they say jump, you say how high. If they need any kind of research done, they need really any real work. Let's be honest. That the judge, is obviously the more experienced, like well versed person. But if they have some kind of case coming up and they need, to be well versed in the subject, they need an opinion drafted. You do the legwork and they look it over and tweak it how they like,
Hmm.
and go from there. You're kind of the mover and the shaker to the judge's thought process.
Gotcha. So you're obviously a barred attorney at this time.
Yeah.
Does the judge also have like a paralegal or non-attorney support staff?
Yeah. So, in my experience, and with a lot of other people I know that clerked, general dynamic is there's the judge, there's their clerk, and then there's they usually call them like a JA or like an administrative assistant,
Okay.
and that person handles the clerical duties, answering phones, filing things, that kind of thing. Sort of to equate it to like the dynamics of a law firm, the judge is like the senior partner, the clerk is the associate, and the JA or administrative assistant would be like the paralegal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Um, so you said you're doing most of the legwork, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean obviously that comes down to writing opinions as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's what a lot of the job is. It's research, drafting. Really any kind of, I don't know, any kind of work that the judge may not want to take an initial stab at, but
Right.
just kind of wants to provide their thoughts and opinions on later. But the clerk is generally the one that does a lot of the work that the judge will end up ultimately using to operate in court.
Okay. So I want to know how that process works because we have, obviously the importance of opinions, right? You're making law, you know.
Sure.
So as the clerk, are you just providing kind of the research and the skeleton of the opinion, and then the judge fills it
Yeah,
in?
no, I mean, I think it's like anything else, it varies on the person. So, like, in my instance, my judge was very hands-on, really handled a lot of things herself. But, I don't know, like, I remember working on a case that involved, like, it was, gosh, what was it? It was like a collections-related thing, essentially they were trying to reach a figure.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it was some research, and you're only going to learn so much, in your limited research compared to a judge who's probably been on the bench for, and at least practicing in the legal field, significantly longer than you have. Like in my case, my judge was, practiced for decades and then has been a judge for decades,
Right.
so.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, because I've always wondered, and obviously it's always fun to see like the personality of judges in
Yeah,
their opinions.
that's very it. You can see it in the opinions, and you can see it in just kind of everyday like operations. Like they vary really really greatly. There's some that are very very laid back, but then when they take the bench, they're fierce. And there's some where that kind of, if they are relaxed, it kind of persist the whole time, and there's some that never seem to calm down on or off the bench. So I mean, it's like anyone else, but
Yeah.
it's just pretty interesting how judges with just how important of figures they are, how that carries over. they're just like people. It's pretty funny
Right.
when you think about like just how important of things they're doing, and then like they'll get off the bench and just say casual things like you'd be thinking, and you're just like, whoa, okay, like obviously that can't be written down, but no, I mean it's I don't know. I guess in a way it kind of gives you perspective because it makes you think like, wow, like they're just like regular people, like
Right.
very smart, very, experienced, well versed people. But like, it's like that's not out of the realms of possibility that you or I could be that one day, or anyone who really aspires to be one. As long as they are capable and work towards it, which is kind of cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you did that right after passing the bar,
Yep.
right? Do you recommend?
Well, actually, because of COVID, it was like I started before even taking the bar exam. Yeah, which is weird. Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you recommend that attorneys, you know, take that step? Like shortly after passing the bar.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really depends. I can't say that it's something that you have to do or should do necessarily, but like you make a lot of good connections. So I think if you have an idea of where or maybe even what type of field you'd like to practice, assuming you want to practice,
Mm-hmm.
not everyone that goes to law school has to practice, but let's assume you do. It's a great way to make connections. I know a ton of people who they got their first practicing jobs, their first jobs, actual attorneys, from the connections they made while clerking for judges.
Okay.
Whether it was people that their judges knew, or maybe people they meet in practicing. Because that's a great thing is you get to get exposed to everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
even now, if I'm in the right circles, I'll walk around and be like, oh yeah, I'm so and so. I worked for this judge during this time period. They'll be like, oh, I know you, and I didn't even know this person. It'll be like someone who like I knew by name or like over an email or something like that. But you serve an important person, so they'll remember you because
Right. That's awesome. And so I'm guessing you got to actually sit in these trials and see many attorneys.
yeah, I got to sit in a few of them, a lot of different hearings. COVID kind of put a wrench into that
I'm
because
sure.
for a while it was like everything was done Zoom,
Right.
which was really weird. So it'd be like, yeah, court's starting, and you'd just be sitting there, over Zoom.
Right.
Even conference calls. They did some things that were like essentially conference calls, like no video, just like a bunch of people calling in,
Huh.
which was really weird. But yeah, no, that's kind of what the benefit of being a clerk is. Like you're not going to make as much money as you would practicing, but it's a lot lower stress. You get the government benefits, which is cool,
Right.
but you really get to learn that's what it is. You get to sit there and you get to, because in a practical sense, being an attorney is really still learning by doing
Mm-hmm.
more than, because in law school they just teach you about the law and they teach you how to think like a lawyer. Then you get out day one, you're like, yeah, I'm ready to practice, and then you're like, ah, shit, like how do I actually, what is the actual step of doing this?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I know I have to do this, but I have no idea how.
Right.
It's all theory up to that point, and then you get to see people do it, and you're like, oh, okay, that's how they do it. So then you get a little bit more of an edge, I think, when you happen to practicing. Of course, in my case, I don't know if it really helped because I went into transactional work, so it's not like I was sitting in court every day watching people draft contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So your current job,
Yeah.
like you said, it's transactional. It's real estate work, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of aptly named, transactional. We assist the transactions for the most part, but I guess the bread and butter of the place I work now is really large scale real estate transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Working with developers, various types of lenders, and borrowers in large scales as they build, like whether it's multifamily housing or kind of commercial developments, things like that. And along the way, you assist with different kinds of financing. Prepare legal opinions and diligence work. It's kind of like a large scale version of buying a house. If you're not familiar with it,
Okay.
when you buy a house, if you're a buyer, you reach out to a seller and say, hey, I like your house. I'd like to buy it for X amount of dollars. And they say, great. And then you have an agreement in principle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a period called a due diligence period from the time that you agree to buy
Mm-hmm.
until the actual closing, the actual settlement date.
Okay.
And in that period, based on the way that the contract's written, there's things that have to be done. You have to, in a residential period, you have to provide proof that, financing maybe is in there, other things like that. So it's like the same concept, but on a commercial scale. So the diligence period's usually a lot longer. Maybe instead of like one buyer working with one bank. It's like a buyer who like has like 3 subsidies and like 4 different kinds of funding or whatever. So it kind of gets a little bit more convoluted. And there's other, for every new wrench you throw in, there's like 5 subsequent things you have to get done. And so that is a huge learning curve because they don't teach you how to do any of that in law school.
No, they don't teach you much.
Yeah. But no, I do that stuff. I do some zoning work. Kind of anything real property related. I have the luxury of working at a great firm where I have a lot of experienced attorneys that kind of offer me different chances to learn.
Okay.
And by that I mean like they specialize in slightly different things, all kind of in the same realm.
Mm-hmm.
But one person will come to me with this bit of research and something that this guy never would have asked. But then the next person will ask me to do something else, and it just varies a little bit. So I think it's a pretty good spot to be in.
So let's talk about the business of your particular field. So
Okay.
transactional, right? It's billable hours, right?
Yeah, I mean that's not exclusive to transactional thing. It's just exclusive to private practice. Really, I guess like you don't bill hours as a government attorney, do you?
Nor do you as a contingency attorney. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I mean billable hours is the antiquated system in the legal field of how they track an attorney's productivity, I guess is the easiest way to do it. But it's generally it is the basically actions you can take that can be put towards bills that can be generated for a client. Saying you could in theory work 10 hours a day and only bill 4 or something like that.
mm-hmm.
It's I don't know. It's kind of a pain. Like I get that you need a system to be able to track how an attorney's doing, but it is a little annoying that it's kind of a thought in the back of your head the whole time. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I need to, am I billing enough hours? Am I doing enough? But system is what it is. And
Yeah.
again, I'm very happy with where I am and kind of the expectations they have, and knowing, I don't know, whether it's the way the economy's going or the way the workflow's going, because that's the other frustrating thing is you can only bill hours if it's something that you're doing on behalf of the client. But if you're an attorney into a firm who doesn't have like a controlling interest, like you're not a partner or something, you're generally not bringing in clients,
Okay.
at least not as much as the other people.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily in charge of your workflow.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh, I'm not billing enough hours. I mean, you could just not be working, which that's on you. But you could just not have enough work, So like, and I'm not saying that that's in my case, but like in theory,
Mm-hmm.
like that's what are you supposed to do? Like
Right.
it's not your fault. But I think people understand that. If you work in a decent firm, like they're going to understand that. They
Ebbs and flows.
yeah, exactly. It's like a business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
you can talk a
it's-
little bit more about that, like,
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like
are you jotting down on a notepad like every 6 minutes? Like,
yeah. I think that is generally how they do it. They do it in increments of 6 minutes. Yeah. But I think it's just because they break it up like the hours into tenths.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like I spent 0.2 hours on this or whatever. But kind of, yeah. That's honestly how it is. Like,
so how do you do it? How do you do it? Is there a software? Is there just a notepad?
some firms have softwares, and I've we don't really use we do. We actually do have a software, but I don't personally enter in there. My assistant does.
Okay.
So honestly, what I do is I have a roaming Excel sheet for each day,
Okay.
and I just it's pretty simple. I just throw in the information for the client, the matter I'm working on, a description of what it is I was doing specifically, so the client can look and be like, oh, he spent an hour doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be like, time entered, Joe Schmo, client,
Mm-hmm.
did X, Y, Z, and that's it. So it's really not that complicated from my standpoint. I'm sure it's
Right.
a pain for my assistant, but I mean, you get why, because then they take that information, they put it into your system, it gets approved through whatever the administrative process is in your firm, and then they generate bills for the clients to act on.
Right.
That's how they get paid.
I occasionally hear about, and maybe this is more in, when you're dealing with clients that are insurance companies or something, but I've heard about it mostly in that context. But do you and the partners at the firm, do you guys talk about like, oh, you build X amount for this task, but it's going to be reduced? Are you part of those conversations?
It's like, I think, any other business really, where like, the client has a face that they put to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, at least in my experience, it's generally I'm an associate in the firm, right? And so generally there's a billing attorney, and that's just like the person whose name I guess would be on the bill that is
Okay.
generated, and that's kind of the face. That's the person who most likely was one of the initial points of contact for this client when they came in or started working on this project.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be work that I do, and I put it in my bills, and then before everything's proved, that attorney, being the billing attorney, because it's their name on it,
Right.
looks it over, and
Okay.
like if they have any tweaks, then they tweak it whatever way they see fit. I think some firms allow um, attorneys to bill even non-billable things technically, but it goes towards your billable hour rate. Even though the firm can't use it to generate money.
Okay.
For instance, like a networking event. While you're going out there and you're trying to get work and you're meeting other attorneys and benefiting yourself and the reputation of the firm maybe. It's not technically something that's going to generate money. It's not like by going to
You're right.
that whatever it might be, that cocktail event for an hour or something like that's actually going to make money for the firm.
Right.
But they still might. Some firms might allow you to put that towards your billable hours.
Hmm. So, if you don't mind me asking, how many billable hours per year is like an average amount, or what does your firm, you know?
Average amount, I can't
Okay.
really speak to that. I mean, I can tell you what. I mean, various job sites. I think it varies. It usually varies in the size of the firm and kind of your market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so larger firm, more billable hours. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's kind of like a range.
Okay.
And then usually as you get more experienced, I believe that goes up as well. So, you know, you whatever you become a senior associate, become a partner, or whatever, your billable hour rate probably goes up. At the same time, your billable rate probably goes up too.
Mm-hmm.
So the same work that you were doing for whatever, let's say $200 an hour, is suddenly $350 an hour or whatever.
Right.
But because presumably it's better quality work because it's getting done by a more experienced, seasoned person. So
Hmm.
yeah,
But their billable like goal for the year, you're saying that also goes up?
probably, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I know it generally does with associates. For partners, I don't really know because at that point you have a stake in the business, but
Mm-hmm.
can't really speak to that. But yeah, I mean,
Fair
that's the
enough.
idea. You make more money. You're getting paid more. You're supposed to put more in. I think that's generally the flow, isn't it?
Yeah. So okay. Let's talk about stress, right? So billable hours often are associated. Well, just look, being a lawyer is associated with stress. Doesn't
Sure.
matter if you're a contingency, whatever. Um, how do you handle stress?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely stress. I think it's just the nature of the job. You that's one of the reasons I love my job is because it probably has a little bit less stress than a lot of other subfields of law, just
Mm-hmm.
because it's I don't know, it's you're handling long form deals and stuff like that. It's not necessarily people, say like in a family law situation or like a criminal law situation where there's a little bit more immediately at stake.
Right.
Like if someone's going to lose possession of their belongings or lose possession of their kids or whatever it might be, or face jail time. It's a bit more stressful for them,
Mm.
right? And you can see how that would overflow, and there's more deadlines because you're proceeding to court and that kind of thing. And in my case, it's not quite as bad. So there's definitely stress. I don't know. You deal with it however you can. I mean, I learn from the people I work with. How they do things. I personally blow off steam. You know, I like to work out, go for a run or something like that. I don't know. I mean, the billable hour thing is definitely crazy. I know a guy who is an attorney, and he recently took a job that has a bit of a pay raise, but not like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think his main reason for taking it, and I don't even know if he'd admit to that, is the reason because it's a job that doesn't require billable hours,
Mm.
which to him I guess mattered enough, where he didn't want to stick around. But
Right.
I think from what I understand, he's going to be working as legal counsel to a company, so it's not an actual firm. Um, but I don't think he's going to have the expectation that he's supposed to bring in business, and there's not going to be billable hours, which is like kind of two burdens off your chest if
Right.
you're a lawyer. You don't,
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about bringing people in or any of that. It's like, oh, cool. I just punch my card and do my work. Yeah,
Right.
sounds kind of good on paper, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the reason, and this is a topic that I focus on quite a bit because of the extremely high rates of like depression, alcoholism, all these things that
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
associated with the legal profession, and obviously it's stressful,
Mhm.
um, but many attorneys, they deal with the stress in a very unhealthy way, and it shows substance abuse,
Yeah,
alcoholism, all that stuff.
yeah. I know both of us have met people like that.
Oh yeah,
Who and honestly, probably even people we could point to who maybe aren't at that point, but we could definitely see them being at that point.
yeah,
And however many years goes by, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I think you have to find other outlets, whether it's I don't know, coping by spending time with someone, or some other kind of outlet, working out, or some kind of hobby. I'm not really sure, but yeah, it's 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 not worth killing yourself over.
yeah, yeah. Would you say there's a stigma?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Okay.
I think definitely. I mean, there's still, even though there's been a lot of modern progress, though, there's definitely a stigma in any field. I think of really getting mental health help, but like just in society, really.
Hmm.
But that's changed a lot, and maybe with attorneys in particular, I think because you're kind of like a fixer, and you control and influence such important parts of people's lives, that maybe when you're put in that position of like power, there is a bit of a stigma of like getting mental health help. But there's plenty of like resources out there. I mean, I think that the state bar has something, right? Don't they have like a
Yeah,
a
they
lawyer's?
do. It seems like every
I
state bar.
don't know what it's called, but it's a service you can contact, and they can whatever, maybe they get you therapy or something like that.
I feel like it's underutilized quite a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah, like
I think we can all probably serve from it, to be honest. I mean,
right.
yeah,
Let's switch over and talk about how your perceptions have changed. Obviously, like before going to law school, entering the legal career,
mm,
um, and I'm assuming I know my perceptions have changed, or like what
okay,
I thought a lawyer would be, right?
sure.
Like there's shows out there, I'm like, hey, being Harvey Specter would be
Yeah,
awesome,
yeah. So I I love TV and movies. Avid reader. I consume a lot of different media, but I've never really been like a courthouse drama person.
Hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with them, just never really stuck with me. So it's not like that was any kind of motivating factor. I'm not related to any attorneys, so that really wasn't anything. Um, I honestly, I wasn't exactly sure what kind of lawyer I wanted to be, and then I went to law school, and my initial reaction was like, oh, I think I'll do something like civil rights related or something like that.
Hmm.
And as interesting as that is to study from like an outside perspective, like an academic perspective, like I did in like undergrad and stuff like that, the actual like I guess the intricacies of the type of law around it would be like more constitutional based and stuff like that. And
Right.
I didn't like it. I
Okay.
didn't like it from like a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
And it didn't. I don't know. It didn't stick with me the exact same way. It's a little bit more abstract, a little bit more argument based. You read these things and they're just opinions written by whoever's on the bench at that time, and you're like, okay, but why? And they're just like, oh, because he thought that way, and it's like, okay, but why?
It's
And
because of the spirit of the law and our
I
founders.
get
And
it, and I get
yeah.
it, but then I just ended up gravitating more towards like things with finite answers,
Right.
where UCC codes,
Right. Right.
which I don't know, it just works a little bit better in my brain for some reason.
Yeah, it's a little more clear cut, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that's why. And if some people are like, oh, that sounds really dry, that's totally cool, more for me, whatever. You go handle your stuff.
Gotcha. So,
But yeah, no, that changed, and then uh, as far as like what lawyer was, I don't know. I really hadn't been around many lawyers,
right.
and I don't know. I guess the perception of what law school was definitely changed. I didn't expect it to be so damn hard, um, but that changed, and then getting to actually watch people practice when I was a clerk, a judicial clerk, that was actually pretty much what I expected it to be.
Hmm.
That was pretty cool. But then I guess really getting out there and what I do now, and going to different events and meeting different attorneys in different subfields and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
that really changed things. Just kind of everyone's different. Everyone has a different attitude, very different mindsets. I mean, it's like I think you end up really just realizing that it's like anything else, where just people vary in any walk of life. But like the legal field is very different than what I would have guessed, going into it, or say 10 years ago, what I would have thought it was.
Hmm.
Just once you're actually in it, it's a little bit different.
I guess what advice would you have for somebody considering law school and becoming a practicing attorney?
Um, I'd say make sure your motivations are right. Kind of make sure you have a good idea of why you want to do it. Because I feel like there are some people that go to law school as kind of like lost sheep.
Hmm.
They're not really sure what they want to do. They're like, I don't really have any science background or anything like that, so maybe they consider themselves not eligible to go anything in the medical field or something like that. But maybe they have a bachelor's of just kind of something general, like a liberal arts degree or something like that.
Right.
And they're not really sure what they want to do. They don't want to teach or pursue anything else, and they're just kind of like, oh well, I'll go to law school because I could be a lawyer that can apply to different things, and that's fine. But it is a lot of resources. It's not cheap.
Hmm.
It's a lot of resources. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of stress. So I said, make sure you do it for the right reasons, because I mean, that sounds like a pretty bad scenario where you end up spending all that time, money, resources, and killing yourself to get through that. Assume you get through, you're barred and everything like that, and then you start practicing and you realize this isn't really what I want to do. So I think whether it's taking time to kind of get a practical sense of what things are like, or if you have some other kind of driving factor, if you like have more of a specific idea of what you want to do, I'd recommend pursuing that, and kind of ironing out those points before you actually pursue it. And it could work out. I mean, I just admitted that I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and it kind of worked out.
Hmm.
But if it didn't, that would have sucked. But yeah, I mean, I'd just say make sure you want to do it, and for the right reasons.
So what about that person that views, again, I'm going to come back to, watches shows like, you know, Suits and stuff, high powered,
Yeah,
attorneys that may or may not be committing malpractice every single episode. But hey, it's dramatic. It's awesome, right?
yeah,
They're making millions of dollars. They're billable. They charge their clients what, $2,000 an hour.
yeah, some absurd.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, what if that's the goal? What if making money and having that prestige is the goal for this person that's
I
considering?
mean, it's definitely a route you can go to do it. It's not going to be always fun to do it.
Hmm.
Of course, in that show, isn't the one guy just like a stud attorney, like really really good, and the other guy's like literally has like a photographic memory or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like those are exceptions, right? I mean, like yeah, not everyone's going to be that guy. And I don't know, and it's going to be difficult doing that, and you have to keep in mind that you're going to have to cut your teeth along the way.
Hmm.
It's not like you're going to come out of the gate necessarily doing that.
Right.
So I don't know. It's a route you can go for sure. There's mad money out there to be made. You can go do it. But it's to me, I feel like that's more of an idea that would grow tiresome in my mind.
Hmm.
Like if I went to law school, being like, yeah, I'm gonna be Harvey Specter.
All right.
That would maybe keep me going for a little bit,
Hmm.
but not a career. Certainly,
Right.
probably not to the end of law school.
Right.
And I don't give a shit about Harvey Specter. I watched the first few seasons; they were cool, and then it got a little melodramatic.
Yeah. I'll admit I've only seen like 2 episodes, but
Yeah, I pretty much watched the point where I can't even think of the guy's name. It's been a few years, but the guy who lied his way into being an attorney, like
right.
falsified the fact
I
that
don't know
he
his
ever
name.
yeah, it gets to a point where like that comes out, and
Okay.
and they have to deal with like more of that. So when that started getting there, it's like got a little bit more dramatic for my taste, and I was just like, yeah.
What about people that are already in law school?
Again, unless I think you're like really passionate about one thing and dead set on it, I'd say take advantage of the time while you're in law school to try out different subfields.
Hmm.
Like if you can work for this type of firm, then work for a different kind of firm, or like you know, I don't know, if you're doing research work, try to do one different topic of research and then a completely different one, because you never know what you're gonna end up liking.
Hmm.
So I think that's a good thing. Like I worked at a few different firms when I was in law school, and that was the reason why. I worked for a title and real estate attorney, which I obviously liked, but it between starting being a full-time clinic student and thinking about transitioning to a different job, I stopped working there and took a job at a different. Also because this firm wasn't one that was going to offer me any job outside of when I actually graduated.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't have the size.
Okay.
But I learned things there, and then I decided, well, this next firm I'm going to go at, I wanted to be different. I wanted to be really different. So it was a firm that did like PI and collections work. Just very different. But I got to dabble in that, and people were great at each place, but I obviously had a preference for one. So I'd recommend just bouncing around. Talk to anyone and everyone that you can in the legal field. Go to networking events, meet people.
Yeah. Watch this YouTube channel.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like the world is. I fully think this. It's who you know.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that are exceptions that there's but it really is who you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of crazy how many people in the subfield that you'll meet. You'll down the road you'll be like, oh wait, I know that person, and that could help you get a job. It could help you get clients. I mean, you really have no idea. It could help you just in the job. Who knows? Maybe that'll be the person on the other side of you one day, and that little connection you have with that person could help you iron out a deal.
Yeah.
So it's I'd really recommend just go into any little networking event you can. Don't get a little too carried away with it. I may have done that, but
it was fun though.
yeah. But no, seriously, I mean, just I'd say get out there, try different things, because you're never gonna really know what it is you like until you've kind of dabbled into it. The thing that you don't really realize until you're in it, like I think people think, okay, what kind of lawyer do I want to be? And they're like, oh well, I want to be a criminal attorney, or I want to be a real estate attorney, or I want to do personal injury stuff, or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they just think about the work, and then there's that other aspect of it where it's not just about the work, it's also about the life around the work.
Yeah.
So I know defense attorneys who they there's like weird busy and slow periods, like with any business, but like theirs seem to be particularly high and low, where they'll go through periods where they have, that they've got, their consistent types of cases they're handling.
Right.
Then they'll have one particular very important high leverage case that they just have to put a lot more in, and they're suddenly working basically around the clock for a period leading up to trial or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the things that attracted me to my field is it's a bit more consistent.
Right.
It's almost as close to a 9 to 5 as you can have in the legal field. Right. I mean, like obviously, when push comes to shove, things have to get done. Maybe you take something home, but it's so that's something to consider. Like what are you willing to work with for hours?
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm like a morning person, so I have the luxury of that. So I pretty much hit things early and usually
end early.
I mean,
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I need to, but like I like to keep things in front of me if possible. If there's a deadline so far away, I like to make sure I'm 2 steps ahead of it if I can.
Yeah.
It just makes things easier. Gives you room for error, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What about journals in law school? So
yeah,
there is
wasn't on one.
Yeah. They always push it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's an actual little anecdote. So yeah, I there's journals in law school. I don't know if it's with every law school, but at least the one that we attended. The push for mock trial teams and for journals comes like towards the end of your first year, and that's essentially when the period to try out, write on, whatever the terminology is, to get onto these things is. And they're, for people that don't really know, it's like an extracurricular law school thing, basically. The journal, it's research and writing, essentially, just to put it in a sentence, and then, the mock trial is pretty aptly named. I didn't really want to do either. Well, actually, that's not true. I wanted to do a mock trial team, but they had a few different varieties. I want to say like at least half a dozen or so different mock trial teams at our school. And then for whatever reason, after our first year, they cut it down, and there was like 2 or 3. So it was like basically it became from like very specific types of law, where there was like an environmental one, a criminal one, and this one and this one, and there was like 2 I really wanted to do, and I even ended up getting pretty familiar with the faculty advisors for those, just because I wanted to be on good base with them. And I was in the process of getting ready to try out for them. Right. And they literally announced they weren't going to be in existence next year. So it's like, oh, okay, then you have to try out for like one of these 2 teams or whatever it was. And I was just like, yeah, that's not my interest. So I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, I was also working like 2 jobs outside of law school. So
Yeah, I
if it
remember.
wasn't something I was invested into, I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew. Uh, in the journal thing, there was, I think, 2 or 3 versions of the journals, and I didn't have any interest in trying out for either of those. Fun fact, though. So there's like a deadline in which you have to write onto a journal, where basically they give you a topic to research and write about. A little bit more to it, but that's essentially what it is in a nutshell. And there's a deadline to submit this work,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where they evaluate whether or not you can make the journal. I wasn't going to do it. Fully didn't plan on doing it. A friend of mine at the time, like literally the weekend, it was due like Sunday at midnight or something like that, and like I think like Saturday, he's like, "Ah, oh, you should do it." And I don't know if we'd had a couple drinks or what the deal was, but I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. I should do it." So dumb. I mean, I, have you ever tried to cram like they give? How long do they give you to do that?
I
It's like
honestly, I blocked it all
it's a
out.
couple months, right? Like it's
I
weeks at least.
it should be weeks.
It's
Yeah.
at least weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's anywhere from a couple weeks to like a month plus of time they give you to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and you're expected to use the whole time, like you're damn close to it. And I tried to literally hadn't looked at this material and tried to cram this whole thing in like 24 hours.
Right.
I don't know where on the spectrum of grading it landed, but I didn't get on, and definitely didn't want to get on. But the funniest part about that is I was bartending and waiting tables, and I was literally like in the server station, like with a laptop, like writing this as like people are like, yeah, I need whatever, I need a cocktail. I was like, oh yeah, I'm coming out.
Right.
I'd come out and mix cocktail, and then go back and be like midnight sitting there.
Yeah. So, why do you think there is this push for these journals? I noticed it's mainly with the journals. I mean, they did have
Oh
mock
no,
drop
it's
teams.
because it looks good on resumes. Yeah.
Right. Do you think it's
It shows that you're because obviously that takes a level of skill and know-how to do well at them. So,
Mhm.
You put that on a resume, it just shows. I mean, it's the same reason that kids applying to college, want to have, basketball on their resume or debate team on their resume or whatever, their transcript, because it shows that you're well-rounded, that you can do different things, that, you have different analytical skills, and that's more or less why.
Yeah. What have you started to value a lot more in just generally? And I guess I'm assuming most of it comes from your experience in the legal field.
What do I value from like a professional
Yeah.
standpoint? Uh, Definitely patience.
Mhm.
Just as a young attorney, you mentioned this earlier, but like it takes us a little bit longer to do things, at least initially, especially if it's something we've never seen before. So I definitely, having the luxury of worked with a few different attorneys now, uh, people that are willing to teach and be patient. I greatly appreciate that, because they put a little bit of extra time in, and they're willing to bite the bullet, for nothing really beneficial to them, but they do that, and it goes a long way towards helping you understand something.
Absolutely.
And I think that's another thing is like when I was talking about being willing to network and talk to different people, even as an attorney, like once you're outside of school, don't stop that.
Mhm.
Like I've gone to different bar events, and uh, there's plenty of services out there that give very affordable or even free lectures on just a variety of different subjects,
Okay.
and the things you can learn from that are like ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, definitely do those. You learn a lot. I went to a bar event 2 weeks ago,
Hmm.
and just learned a bunch of different stuff that like I had touched on, but just to have the luxury of someone sitting there practiced explaining to me for like 10, 15 minutes, I was like, wow, I get it now. Like it was just, they were explaining different kinds of just real estate related items, but I don't know. I think people that are in the thick of things for so long as an attorney or just in general, you start to kind of take for granted things that you understand now that maybe someone in your position years ago didn't.
Right.
And so, obviously they're not always going to even think to explain something like that to you. So if there's like a little detail that you can kind of get explained to you, outside of having to take the time of your boss or someone else to do it,
Hmm.
I definitely go for it. So yeah, any kind of
Mentorship.
yeah, any kind of mentorship, free continuing learning that you can go into, whether it's going onto YouTube and looking at some guy in a law firm talk to another attorney.
No, what's your favorite part about just being an attorney?
I think it's a respected profession.
Mhm.
So I guess from an outside perspective, it's nice to have that. But I think realistically about my specific part of it is the fact that how open people are to working things out. It's not as adversarial as other parts of the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm on the side of the plaintiff and someone else on the side of the defendant, and you're kind of combative to an extent. There are different sides, obviously, to the things we work on, but it typically isn't as combative. And like if there's an issue, everyone kind of at the end of the day wants to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone is, if there's a problem, if there's something that you disagree on, everyone's much more willing to kind of come together, put their heads together, and just be like, hey, let's hash this out. And I kind of love that. I love just the talking and the negotiation aspect of it, and kind of translating complex thoughts into written word, which is pretty cool. So, I think another part of being really cool with the real estate work is that you get to see your work out there. Meaning like you're working on properties that maybe you get to drive by the next
That's
day,
awesome. Yeah.
which is really cool. Or like you're working on whatever, maybe it's a new housing development, maybe it's a new commercial property, and like you actually get to see it.
Mm-hmm.
You can go by there and be like, oh, I worked on that. Or like, hey, this, like, yeah,
It wouldn't have been built maybe without my input.
yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool.
No, I hear you, man, and that's great. Always seeing a tangible like
Yeah.
effect of your work.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. On that note, thank you. Thanks, Austin.